Today, we're going to create and assign materials using Python. After watching this video, you will be able to create new materials, modify the material properties, and assign the new material to a group of objects by name. All this from the Scripting tab. Okay, let's get started. You might recall from the previous video, we were able to use the Blender Python interface to apply rotations to all of the objects in this grid. If you haven't seen that video, you can check it out. I'll put a link in the description. In the previous video, we colored the cubes blue, but the rest of the objects, you can see here, the rest of the objects did not have a material assigned. So today, let's add a unique material to each type of object and get some color into this scene. First thing is let's jump over to the Scripting tab. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is make sure the rendering engine is set to Eevee. So we come over here to the settings, choose Eevee in the dropdown, and that's all we need to do here. And then in terms of the 3D viewport, we want to go into the material preview mode, which is this one here. And we want to go into the settings and make sure that these two selections are turned off, the scene lights and the scene world. If we turn those on, you'll see everything gets dimmed out. So we'll turn those off, and we're going to come back to this setting later on in the video. All right, now let's create some cool reflective materials. We can do this process by hand just to see how it works. So I'm just going to pick one of these spheres. I'll hit the numpad period key to center on this. And what we can do is we can add a new material. So we get on here to the materials tab, click on new, and we now have a new material assigned to our sphere. We want to make sure that we have the use nodes enabled here like this. And then there's two settings that we're interested in. The first one is the base color. So click on the base color and we can pick any kind of color. That one looks pretty nice. And we can see it's not very reflective at the moment. So we go down here to roughness. And what we can see here is depending on how you set the roughness is how reflective the material becomes. And it's kind of hard to see because of all the flat surfaces here. So we want to right click and choose shade smooth. Okay, now we can actually see a little better the reflectivity of that. We go back over to the roughness setting, and we can change this to 1. We can see there's no reflection, and if we change it to 0, we can see the reflection. Now, where does that come from? In the drop down here, we can choose which environment we're using, and that's what gets reflected in the sphere. So for now, I think we're just going to choose the this bedroom scene, and we can go forward with that. Looks kind of cool. Lots of different things to see. We spin around, we can see different parts of the environment are actually reflected in the sphere. Okay, now we've seen how to create a material by hand. And if you recall from the previous video over here, we have create a new material. We did that for a simple diffuse color material. And the function that we used was bpy data materials.new, and it takes a name. Here, in this case, it was cube matte, and we could assign a diffuse color. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that takes the desired material name and the desired material color, takes those as arguments, and then we'll return back to the caller a new material with the desired name and the desired color. So let's go ahead and start out up here at the top. I'm going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to define a new function, and we're going to call that create. We'll call this actually create reflective material. Let's do that. All right, and it's going to take as an argument the name, so the material name, and it's also going to take in the red, green, and blue color values that we want to assign to the new material. All right, so we've got that. So first thing we're going to do is say new matte equals, and then basically down here we can kind of copy and paste what we had done before. This. And instead of setting the name with a string, we're going to set it with the material name argument. All right, so that gets us our new material. So now let's explore creating a new material interactively. So again, we can take this code from before. Actually, let's use this one, which has the name in it. Copy this, paste it over here. We're going to call this test matte. assign it to test mat. Enter. All right, so now we can see if we look at the type of this, we can see it's a material, so that's great. And again, we want to make sure that we have the use nodes value set to true, so we can toggle this, and we can see down here we want to set the use nodes property to true. So we can say test mat.use nodes equals true. All right, no problem there. Now what we want to do is we want to take a look at the shader that's assigned to this material. It's one of the nodes, and you can see here from before, if we actually change, we'll just change the color to show you how it works. Change this color to green, and we can scroll down to the bottom here, and we can see what happens is in the node tree attached to the material, there's a node with the title principled BSDF, and that has an input, and the first input 0, and the default value is whatever the color is we just chose in the user interface. So that seems complicated, but really it's not too difficult. So what we want to do here is we want to say, so first of all, let's just use the tab completion. So we say test mat dot node tree. If you hit tab, it'll complete dot n tab. There you go. And then we can actually put a single quote there, and it'll give us the two choices. So we can say PRIN tab. Again, the tab completion is filling this out for us. Inputs. Okay. Oh, and then here we can see there's roughness from before, and then there's also base color. So we can actually, instead of using the index 0 to access these, we can use their names, which would match the names found over here in the user interface. So roughness and base color. So we can type a tab, that'll give us base color. And then again, we see we want to have the default value. We say default value, and then that's equal. Then we can say 0, 1, 0, 1, and that's red, green, blue, and alpha. So that's how we would programmatically set the base color of our new material. So let's copy this, and we'll paste it up into our script. We're going to add in the use nodes from before. Use nodes equals true. And we're going to go ahead and paste this from the interactive window. And remember, this is, in this case, this is a new mat, not test mat. And we don't want the value to be, we want to assign the value based on the red, green, and blue arguments passed in to the function. And then 1 is always going to be our alpha value. In fact, let me make this a little wider so you can see that. All right, so now we've actually been able to set the base color, and we're going to do the exact same thing for the roughness, except in this case, we want the roughness to be set to 0, so we make it reflective. So we can just do the same thing as before, no tab dot nodes, again, tab complete inputs, and in this case, we're going to use roughness, so ROU tab, and then again, the default value. And we can just check this over here just to make sure. Change this. We can see, yep, default value equals 0 is what we want. Equals 0. Hit enter. And now we can basically copy and paste this line again here. And the only difference is we're going to change this to new mat. All right, so now we've created the material, assigned the base color, and assigned the roughness to 0. And that should give us everything we need. The only thing now is we're going to return new mat, which is sending back to the caller of the function this new material that we were able to create. Yeah, so this is it. And let's move on to the next step. So what we're going to do here is remove the previous code to create the material and assign the color. So we're going to get rid of that. We're also going to get rid of this assignment, the material assignment, and that's just going to leave us with the rotation from before. So what we're going to do is create a new material for each of the object types. So we're going to create 4 new materials, 1 for each object type. So we're going to create the cube mat. We're going to say that's create reflective material, and we're going to give it a name called cube mat. And our colors are going to be, let's make it 0. That's the red, green. And so we're going to make this basically a blue color. All right, now we're going to make cones. So cone matte equals create. And again, you can use the tab completion here as well. Cone matte. And these we're going to make more red. So 0.8. I like to use a little bit less than 1.0. It just makes it a little bit of a softer color. We can get into colors more in another video. What else do we have? We got spheres. Okay. Okay. And let's make these green. And last one is going to be cylinder. And let's see, let's make these, we'll combine some red and green together. Let's do that. And if you want a particular color, you could always go over in the base color, kind of pick what you want, and then look at the values here. Actually, you have to click on RGB. So, in this case, we look at this 0.8, 0.8. That's going to give us kind of a nice yellow color. So let's go with that. Okay, so now we have 4 new materials. How do we assign those materials to the objects? I think we should select them by name, and then we can apply those materials in the same way we did for the cubes earlier. And again, we're going to want to turn this into a function that will pass in the string to use to match the object name and the material we want to assign to the group of objects. So let's go back to the top of the source code here. We're going to make a new function, and we're going to call this one assign materials to objects. Okay, and we want to take in as arguments the string. So we're actually going to call this the material name search. And let's say the new material that we want to assign to that particular group of objects. And so the first thing we'll do is we're going to say objects equals to, and we're going to do another list comprehension here. So obj for obj in dpy.data.objects if object.name starts with material name search. And we got to close that out. Okay, and again, we can kind of, just to test this out on the command line, we can do this. We can copy this and paste it in here. Okay, and of course we get, this is not defined. So what we'll do is we're just going to say, let's look for, let's see, we have our objects. For example, cone. So let's say if it starts with cone, and we should, now we get a list of objects here. And you can see that list of objects includes all of the objects where the name starts with cone. So this is a really handy way to search for objects by name, and you can group them together this way. Now, once we have that group of objects, we can say for obj in objects, this is the easy part, obj.data.materials.append new material. And that's it. We don't need to return anything because we're actually operating on the object database directly. So let's move on to the bottom and let's say assign the new materials by name. And so we'll do this. All right, we can use the tab completion again. So we can say assign. We're going to use cube for the first one, and then that takes the cube matte material. And actually, let's just try this to see what happens. We've been using, we've been writing a lot of code without actually checking it and seeing what happens. So I would recommend you do this periodically. All right, so this actually looks like it's working. So we have the cubes with their materials. Now let's do each one in turn. So we can say assign, and let's do cone. And then we're going to say cone mat. Again, might as well give it a try. Okay, there we go. Looking good. Let's do the last two. Assign sphere, sphere mat. And I think this is going to work. So we'll just do the last one. Cylinder, and then cylinder mat. Now, if we hit this, all right, this is great. Now each object type has a different color, which makes it a lot easier to work with and to see all the different types of objects. Okay, this is actually looking pretty good. Now let's zoom in a little bit. And you remember before we had these individual faces. You can see them on the cylinder, the sphere, the cones as well. Let's go ahead and right click, shade smooth. And we can see that affects the reflectivity. It looks much nicer now. We don't see those individual faces, but we actually want to do this for all of the meshes. So we can go up here, we can say select all by type mesh. And then again, right click, shade smooth. And these are the two commands that we need to put into the code to actually make this happen automatically. So let's go ahead and do that at the bottom here. Say shade smooth. We can literally, for this, we can use the operator. So we can just copy this, paste it here. And same thing here, copy and paste it here. Now, if we run the script again, we can actually see everything looks nice and smooth. And of course, we're also going to want to deselect the objects just like we had done before. Anytime you use an operator and select a bunch of objects, you want to deselect them again so it doesn't look like this. So if we run the script, we can see after running the script, we've got everything selected. So let's just make sure to deselect everything. Run this again. All right, that looks much better. Everything's smooth and nothing is selected. All right, just a few more things and we'll wrap this one up. All right, now we can create materials, adjust their parameters, assign those materials to objects by name, and even set up different environments to show off reflections. Coming up next, let's explore creating lights for a more dramatic effect. If you have anything else that you'd like to see in an upcoming video, just let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to cover it. If you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe, maybe hit the like button and stay tuned. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.